All right. Hello and welcome to the World Map Podcast. This is episode number 22 and doing another solo mission here this week. Unfortunately, your other host, Nick, is on some travel, and Clark is actually having some internet issues. So thanks to Time Warner Cable, both for not sponsoring this show and also for totally sucking. But hopefully both of your other hosts will be back next week. And still got a good episode lined up for you today. Got a lot of good stuff to talk about, including that Star Wars Battlefront beta that's been going on. So let's get right into it. I'm your host, Josh, and this is the World Map Podcast. If this is your first time joining us, you should know that this podcast covers everything in the world that could be on the map in terms of video games, movies, comic books, tabletop games, you name it. We talk about all of it. New technologies from VR to the latest iPhone. We talk about the news, we review it all, and get you up to speed on everything you need to know in the realm of nerdery for each week. And so let's jump right into the backlog. So each and every week on the World Map Podcast, we talk about the things that we're clearing out of our backlogs, and it's an ever-growing stack of games to play each week, as I'm sure all of you out there are well aware and experience every week. But this week, pretty unique experience because I had a chance to jump into the much anticipated Star Wars Battlefront beta. And let's make one thing clear right up front. When big publishers like EA call something a beta less than a month or about a month before the release date of the game, it's no longer a beta. There used to be such a thing as a beta test. I guess in some ways there are still beta tests out there. But this isn't even like a Steam early access thing. This is a demo, okay? So they can call it whatever they want. This is a demo. Pretty sure by this point there are discs being printed. Anything that comes out of this beta in terms of changes will probably be in the form of a day one patch. Not a lot of the game is going to change. Whatever game you play in the quote-unquote beta at this point, pretty much the game. This is a demo, okay? So now that we've got that clear, I'll share my thoughts on the Star Wars Battlefront beta. Again, I played it on PS4, and I spent 2 days, and probably over the course of those 2 days, spent probably 4 to 5 hours with the beta. I played all 3 of the modes that were available in the beta. I played the Drop Zone, I played the Walker Assault, and I played the solo survival mission on Tatooine mode, which is basically just a horde mode or firefight for you Halo fans. But it's kind of like waves of enemies come and you're fighting against them. So I was very, very excited about the Star Wars Battlefront beta. Very excited about this game. I've had it pre-ordered for months. Couldn't be happier that Star Wars is coming back in a big way with Rebels and The Force Awakens, and both of those things, seem to be great thus far from what we know. And was really hoping that Battlefront would also be pretty awesome. But I gotta say, I am very disappointed. So much so that after several hours with Battlefront, I canceled my pre-order. And I thought I'd be playing it all weekend. I thought that would be like my weekend would just be dedicated to Star Wars Battlefront. Thought I'd be so into it because it's what everybody wants, right? It's big, epic Star Wars battles. Not so much. I did not find the game to be fun or even just really that good. It's a very, very pretty game, extremely pretty. One of the prettiest shooters I've ever seen. One of the probably the best on-screen video game realization of anything Star Wars that's ever been done. The snow on Hoth is glittery and sparkly and beautiful. The laser sound effects are spot on. As far as look and sounds of this game, you pretty much can't get any better. But unfortunately, it stops right there. Unfortunately, the actual gameplay and the actual package that DICE has put together here, the developer who worked on this and being published by EA, it's not a good game. It's just not good. There were some minor bugs here and there. You'd kill enemy and you kind of see them floating in the air with the dead body, or they'd like be stuck in something, in some element inside of the map or whatever. And it's a little laggy here and there. Those are things I can forgive in a pre-launch demo. Those are things that are easily fixable. Those are things that, even if they're in the final game, probably will be patched very quickly. And they don't really break the game experience so much in any way. But the modes are so cookie cutter. They're not new. There's nothing new here that you haven't played before. It's King of the Hill style, control an area until the timer counts down with the drop zone stuff. The Walker Assault is essentially, it's really team deathmatch. I mean, yeah, there's a timer because there's some objectives on the map and you're waiting to see if the walkers, the AT-ATs, make it to the rebel base or not. So there's that element of it. But at the grand scheme of things, it's I think 20 versus 20 deathmatch. I mean, it's just, sometimes people don't even do the objectives, obviously, but there's nothing really new there. And then the solo missions, like I mentioned before, the quote unquote survival mode is really, it's nothing more than just a horde mode or a firefight mode like you would see in Gears of War or Halo. And obviously, people have been comparing this game a lot to Battlefield, which DICE has also worked on, been comparing it a lot to Call of Duty. I think this game actually feels more dated than those games. I'm not a fan so much of those FPSs either. If I'm going to play an online multiplayer shooter, Halo's probably my game of choice. But, those biases aside, just looking at this game subjectively as a shooter and taking it for what it is, knowing that it's not supposed to be those style of shooters, it's still not fun. Still not good. And I feel like they just slapped a Star Wars skin on a mediocre shooter that feels very, very dated. It feels like a shooter we would have played years and years and years ago. It doesn't immerse you in Star Wars. Yeah, you see stormtroopers everywhere. You see rebel troopers. You see vehicles that from the Star Wars universe. You hear the music. You're on the planets. But it's just it doesn't feel like Star Wars, and I think part of the problem and part of the reason for that is a lot of it is about we love Star Wars because of the story. Star Wars is about that story. It's about the dark side versus the light side. It's about these great characters, and you don't get any of that here. Taking that element away just makes this a mediocre shooter that happens to be Star Wars. So it's very disappointing as a Star Wars fan and as someone who is really hoping for a new, fresh, unique take on the online multiplayer shooter. And the one thing that I thought might be the saving grace of Star Wars Battlefront would be the vehicle combat. And big mess up on EA's part, not having the fighter squadron mode as part of the beta. I mean, how are you gonna test the game and test how the game is gonna work without accessing the mode that is probably going to end up being the most popular mode of the entire game? I think none of that mode is in the beta, but when you do get to control ships and vehicles, they're horrible. They're straight up burning trash garbage. And I hate to crap all over a game because I know that there are people out there who worked. Burned the midnight oil developing this game. There's probably some guy out there who spent half of his life making the door to one of the turrets on Hoth or something. And, I feel for those people. I'm sure they put their best foot forward. And like I said, the game at its core looks very, very nice. It plays probably as they intended it to play. The problem is just that those core mechanics just aren't fun. There's nothing fun about them. And part of the reason for that is that the vehicles, especially the ships, they control horribly. They feel like if you had a ship out in front of you on a stick and you had to move it on the stick, there's no real tilt maneuverability to that so much. There are some evasive maneuvers you can do for some unknown retarded reason. Those are mapped to the D-pad, and they have a cooldown on them. Last time I checked, there's no cooldown on how many barrel rolls that a ship can do. I don't know what never saw that in the movies. So they're just few and far between. So another problem with the game is that the ships are limited to power-ups. So you don't have the ability to get in a ship. If you see a ship parked in a hangar, like on the Hoth level, there are all kinds of these X-Wings parked inside the hangars. You can't interact with them. You can't do anything with them. You have to wait until a magic little blue icon of a power-up magically materializes on the field. Go pick that up. Hope it's one for a ship. Push the R1 and L1 buttons and hope you don't die while you're sitting there frozen in time, calling in a ship. And then somehow you magically materialize inside of the ship. And you're in it for probably 30 seconds before something shoots you down or you crash into something or whatever. They're completely useless. The only way I saw anyone using the ships with any sort of success was by crashing them into AT-ATs or ATSTs. No one was actually like doing dogfights or really like able to affect the outcome of the battle without committing kamikaze basically with the ships, because they just control so horribly. They're imprecise. They seem just not as useful as you would think they should be. And like, that's the one part of the game that should feel extra sleek and easy to control and fun. And it just doesn't. Part of it's how they have the buttons mapped. Part of it is just the weird, like kind of out in front of you way that the ship is controlled, and the scale of the ship to the rest of the battle feels off. It's just bad. And that whole power up system is really weird. They touted the fact that you would be able to play with heroes like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Few and far between. In the several hours and many matches that I spent with the beta, I saw one hero one time, and that was on the Hoth level. I saw Darth Vader for a split second. I actually ran into him inside of the Rebel base. He was in one of the hallways. He force choked me. I popped around a corner in a hallway. He was at the far other end of the hallway, and he force choked me to death before I even really saw him. And the only reason I saw him was in the like death animation. I was like, what in the heck killed me? And I looked and I saw that it was Darth Vader. So the heroes are very powerful, as they should be, but you just don't see them very often at all in the game. There's little opportunity to use them. And like I said, I had a very brief glimpse of an encounter with Darth Vader. And when you do die, the spawn points are ridiculously bad, especially on the Hoth Walker assault level. Multiple times I was spawned right in front of an AT-AT, so I spawned, and before I could even take a step, I would be killed. So the spawn points do not spawn you in safe areas to give you a chance to join the battle. And then in some of the other maps, the spawn points are so far away, you're just hiking for quite a while to get to where the action is taking place. I will say, out of all the modes, the solo survivor mode was probably the one that I had the most fun with. But the arena in which that takes place is very, very tiny and small. This is all the maps in the game are very small. I mean, I would find myself on this little red border on my mini map so often and be like, wow, I did not move that far across the map, and I'm already to the edge of the map. Like, this is a tiny little environment, and it just doesn't lend itself to these what should feel like these big epic battles. And the feeling of that is just not there. And as I mentioned before, the power-ups really seem to break the organic experience of a battle. If you were running by a ship and you wanted to jump in that ship and, organically just be able to jump in that, do some battle, land it, get back out, whatever, you can't do that. You got to rely on finding power-ups, and kind of breaks the experience of being in the heat of the battle pretty often. So I got to say, at the end of the day, I canceled my pre-order. Star Wars Battlefront beta. If you're having fun with it, great. If you feel like this is the game for you, I'm happy for you. But I think the majority of people who were expecting this to be an experience that would blow them away are going to be extremely, extremely disappointed by Star Wars Battlefront. So moving on to the rest of the backlog of what I played this week, is I played a good portion of this month's free PS Plus games. The October PS Plus games, I played Super Meat Boy on PS4. And I'm not a Super Meat Boy fan. I know there are a lot of Super Meat Boy fans out there. It's weird to me because it tries to be a retro platformer, but the jumping is not that precise retro platformer jumping. It's crappy, floaty, weird jump controls where you barely push the button and you go floating and flying off the edge of the screen. And just the impreciseness of the jump mechanic in that game seems mismatched for the level of preciseness that the developer wants you to have to navigate through such a difficult environment in terms of the levels they've designed. I will say the level design is brilliant. I'll say it's very disappointing that the PlayStation version of this game got robbed on the music licensing, and so there's a whole different soundtrack from the version that I have on Steam, and it's much worse. The original soundtrack for this game was amazing, but I played through the first world of Super Meat Boy and kind of tossed it to the side because it's just not a game that I feel mechanically lives up to the hype that it has gotten over its life. I also played Kung Fu Rabbit on the Vita, which feels more like an iPhone game. The jumping actually mechanically is more precise than Super Meat Boy, I think. I think it's actually controls quite well, but the level design is too easy and too boring to actually make you want to play more than a few levels. I also tried Kickbeat on the Vita, which is a rhythm-based music type game where you play a kung fu fighter in the middle of an arena and these ninjas circle around you as the music plays and they attack you in rhythm with the beat. So you're pushing based on if you're on your left, right, up, or down side of you. You're using the buttons on the Vita: triangle, circle, square, cross button. And so you're pushing in the beat to be able to kick the opponent ninjas before they punch you. I found the game, I'm not a fan of rhythm games, so it's really not for me in the first place. But I found that the animations of those ninjas circling you get so crowded, it's difficult to actually tell which ones are lined up to attack you next in relation to the beat. And so I just found that the graphics of the game kind of hindered the experience for me to be able to have that much fun with it and play it. And then finally, I did try the PS Plus game this month, Broken Age from Double Fine. That's Tim Schafer's company, the legendary point-and-click adventure game designer Tim Schafer. And Broken Age, he wrote and directed that game. And I must say, I am not a point-and-click adventure fan anymore. I certainly was in like the early 90s on PC, and those were kind of revolutionary and fun then. I grew to not really like that type of game, found them to be a little dull and a little unintuitive as they went on through their life. I think a lot of times these types of games fall into the realm of trying to trick you more so than trying to make you think cognitively about a puzzle. But I found the first act of Broken Age to just be absolutely mesmerizing. I couldn't put it down. It was so much fun. And it was just charming. That's the only way to describe it. It was just straight up charming. The second act of Broken Age, however, fell into that trap of point-and-click adventure games that I think most of us actually vehemently dislike. But for some reason, the point-and-click adventure game overlords decide that kind of stuff needs to be in there. But there are some very unintuitive puzzles in the second act, things that you're just randomly trial and error, right? So you're just combining items with things on the screen to see, maybe this will work, maybe this will work. In the first act, things were logical, things that should work together. You had to think through them a little bit, and then it would kind of click for you and be like, oh, this item probably does interact. Probably I can use a pressurized can of whipped cream as a jetpack to get to this next area, right? Like even things that are a little abstract, when you think about them, made sense. In the second act, that's all thrown out of the window. There are these horrible puzzles, especially involving some wiring of some robots that you have to do, and I won't spoil anything in the story, but just things like that where it's very trial and error, and you kind of got to like try something and then put it on a pedestal, like a little portal to see if it works, and if it doesn't, you pull it back off and you try to wire it up a different way and put it back. And there are just several puzzles that really you're just kind of going through the levels and clicking everything on the screen and trying to interact with everything, with every single item in your inventory to see what will finally work. So it falls into that point-and-click adventure game trap that a lot of those types of games do in the second act. But the story and the characters were so fun and so well written and so charming that I still, even though I wanted to rip my hair out throughout most of the second act, I kind of started to hate the game a little bit. I had to finish it. I just had to finish it because the story is just so whimsical and so well done. I wanted to kind of see the outcome of these characters that I had invested in, and so I hesitantly recommend Broken Age. I think most people, I think the game can be beaten in like an hour or 2 hours if you know your way through all the puzzles immediately. My guess is on a first playthrough, no one will be able to do that. It took me about 8 hours to complete the game, just working through it on my own. I think if you're more of an inexperienced point-and-click adventure game player, I think this is one where there's no shame in using a wiki to get you through it a little faster than those 8 hours, because there were definitely 1 or 2 hours here and there that I spent just doing everything possible that I could think to do, and then finally through trial and error would solve something and be like, oh, that doesn't really make sense, but okay, I'm glad I get to move on to the next area. So again, hesitantly recommend Broken Age. I think purely just to see what they do with the story and how they intertwine the story of two characters. It's worth a playthrough, and it's on a lot of platforms now. So go out there and find it on your platform of choice. I think it may even be on iOS at this point, and I think give it a try. So one note about the PS Plus games for the month of October for PS4 owners is that a game called Unmechanical Extended, which is also a puzzle game, is part of your PS Plus subscription this month. You get that for free for PS4, but it is not showing up in the PSN store. It's not showing up in the PS Plus tab when you go there. For some reason, that game is not being shown to the PS Plus subscribers on the PS4 system. When you go through the menus, it's totally buried. But if you do a search for Unmechanical Extended on your PS4, that game will come up and you will see that it is free for you to download this month. So I haven't had a chance to try that one because I just figured that out today, but just want to give everyone that heads up. One more thing to talk about in the backlog that's not a video game, a little tabletop time here. Got a game that was recommended to me by Jeff Kanata, and this game is called Splendor. And it is I guess not so much a board game because there's not a board. It's more, it comes with some cards and it comes with tokens that are little gemstones. They're little jewels. And so this game is all about gaining prestige. And you want to get nobles to come visit you. You want to basically become the most famous sort of real estate investor / precious jewels dealer in the Renaissance time period, right? So what you do to play this game is you have cards that are development cards that you can buy, and they're sort of like owning various, owning ships or owning land or whatever it might be. And you want to buy these development cards because each one is worth a certain amount of prestige. And the person who gets 15 prestige first ends the round. And then at the end of the round, whoever has the highest prestige wins. So you can, on your turn, choose to get 3 jewels of different kinds. You can choose to get a certain amount of jewels of the same color. You can reserve a development card so that another player can't buy it, but you kind of keep it in reserve. And then you can also purchase things as one of your actions on a turn. So what you're really trying to do is balance out your different gemstones, your different jewels, so that you have enough to purchase the development cards that have the most prestige points. The wrinkle that throws in there is each development card has a bonus that comes with it where it has a jewel in the corner of it, and you get to, once you own a development card, use that jewel towards your purchases without having to actually give that development card back. So instead of having 3 sapphire tokens for something that costs 3 sapphires, I could have 2 if I have a development card with a bonus of 1 sapphire. So you're really trying to get combinations that pay off for you to buy the cards that are face up on the board on the table quickly enough to get to 15 prestige points. And then the final wrinkle to that is that once you get a certain amount of bonuses of any one jewel, a noble, and there are 3 noble cards that you lay out, if you get enough bonuses that match the bonus key on that noble's card, that noble will come visit you, and you also get their prestige points added to your own. So it's a very strategic game and a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun playing this game. I want to get better at it. I want to learn more, kind of get into it. The first time you play a new game, you're really kind of learning the rules and muddling your way through it. And I think now that I fully comprehend some potential strategies of the game and how to play it, and wouldn't have to be like reading through the instructions the whole time. It'll go much faster. It's a great game, 2 to 4 players, I believe, and about 30 minutes to play around. So it's perfect. It's very inexpensive. It's under $30 on Amazon. It even comes with free same-day shipping on Amazon Prime for Amazon Prime members. So I highly recommend everybody go try Splendor. I think it's easy enough to comprehend, fun for the whole family, and go give it a try. So next thing I guess we'll do is call in the news motorcycle. So in news this week, not a huge busy news week, but 2 things I did want to talk about. One of those being that PS4 bundles are now reduced to $349.99 in the US. Previously $399.99, so now they're on par with the cost of the Xbox One. I don't feel like this is a huge deal because if you are smart enough to shop around, you're going to have already found a $349 bundle of a PS4 somewhere on the internet. Not that difficult to find that price already anyway, but now it's an official price cut. We've been heading there for a while. But the interesting part of this is that Xbox looks very well primed to take over during the holiday season and potentially win the months of maybe October with Halo 5, November and with Rise of the Tomb Raider, and then December obviously moving into the holidays with a couple of big exclusives there. Obviously Xbox One has been on much of a course correction since Phil Spencer came in and took over. They've abandoned a lot of the unfriendly to consumer type policies that the Xbox One launched with. They're still obviously trying to overcome that messaging that a lot of people still don't realize that they've changed a lot of things with the Xbox One, that you can get one unbundled with the Kinect at this point. You don't have to have that weird software that pretty much they stopped supporting. No one there. I haven't seen a Kinect game, launch in a long time. So interesting with the PS4 price cut. Now, Microsoft has less of an advantage. Yeah, they had a huge advantage going into this holiday season because so many PS4 games that were going to be exclusives for the Sony console were delayed, or the lineup just wasn't that big to begin with. An interesting fact, if you think about it, is that there were no first-party Sony-owned studio exclusive games that were new games that came out at all in 2015. Think about that. So, obviously you had Media Molecule release Tearaway Unfolded, but I don't think that counts because that was just kind of a remake, a port of Tearaway from the Vita with a few changes. So if you think about it, no Sony-owned first-party studio released a AAA exclusive at all this year, and they will not in all of 2015. It's unheard of. Yet the PS4 has a huge lead over the Xbox One because of the really good message, the really good marketing that they had coming out of the gate, and some of the great HD remasters that they've put together. There's a huge number of Xbox 360 gamers who jumped ship to PS4 when the PS4 launched. So those are the people playing Last of Us Remastered, the Nathan Drake Collection, all these games that they never played on the PS3. And then that combined with the second and third party support that Sony has had this year, and the marketing deals that they've had, they're now the Call of Duty machine, whereas Xbox used to be the Call of Duty machine. PS4 has been able to sustain itself and gain a huge lead sales-wise over Microsoft in 2015 and throughout the life of the two consoles. So it's interesting that, Sony's doing so well without actually putting out any games, and Microsoft really looked poised to take over this holiday season. But now this price cut is going to make things very interesting because now the two consoles are on par price-wise. So we're going to have to see if the couple of exclusives, Rise of the Tomb Raider being the timed exclusive and Halo 5 being the console exclusive to the Microsoft Xbox One, will those two titles be enough to carry Microsoft to win November, December, maybe even October, maybe even January? I feel like if Microsoft doesn't win sales-wise over Sony in at least 2 of those months, probably 3 of them, it's going to be, both of the consoles realistically compared to historical sales are on a pretty good pace and selling well. But I think it spells a little bit of trouble for Microsoft if they can't put something together to gain a little more of an edge this holiday season, because this is the time for them to do it. They're well poised to do it. So if they fail to do that this holiday season, I think Microsoft is in pretty big trouble. It'll be interesting to see the outcome and what we're talking about in, say, February regarding Microsoft and the future of the Xbox One. One other news item, Ubisoft this week announced Far Cry Primal, which I am super excited about. It takes place in 10,000 BC, and Far Cry Primal is their Stone Age version of Far Cry. Now, after playing Far Cry 4, I very much enjoyed the game, but I felt it was a little bit not on par with Far Cry 3. Still think Far Cry 3 is the better game. Far Cry 4 had a little too much padding in it, tried to do a little bit too much, got a little bit boring, a little kind of vanilla with some of the environments and missions. So Far Cry 3 definitely the better game there, even though Far Cry 4 was pretty good. But I definitely, because Far Cry 4, I spent so many hours with it to platinum it, and didn't enjoy it as much as 3. I wasn't hankering for Far Cry 5. Like I kind of felt like, okay, take a few years, come back with a fresh concept. We don't need Far Cry 5 for a while. I like that series a lot, but I'm not quite ready to dive back into it yet because I didn't love the last game. And then they announced, out of the blue, they announced Far Cry Primal, which is not called Far Cry 5, and I think that's fine. And this actually looks like a very exciting concept, looks like a fresh idea to actually play a Far Cry game in prehistoric times, in the Stone Age. The trailer they showed, if you have not seen the trailer that they showed for Far Cry Primal, go watch it. It's really, really fun. It really makes me want to play this game because you're a hunter. You know, you're not going to have guns, right? You're not going to have, I play Far Cry games as a stealth person most of the time anyway. I don't use a lot of the guns. So this is a very intriguing game to me. I'm very interested in it because I think it will cater to a lot of the way of how I play Far Cry games, primarily just with the bow and arrow. And to see like the tribe getting together to take down a woolly mammoth with all these bows and arrows and everybody teaming up to hunt sounds really, it just looked like it would be really fun, really cool. Some new experiences. And then I also think back to what Ubisoft did with Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, which if you haven't played Blood Dragon, you're doing yourself a disservice. That was an absolutely amazing spin-off game. Go try Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, the sort of standalone expansion or DLC for Far Cry 3, where it's got an 80s theme, all this cool 80s music, a lot of neon colors, and these like Godzilla-type dragons that you're leading around and stuff on the map. So cool, so cool. So I think Far Cry Primal is kind of in that same realm where, it's that kind of spin-off type version of Far Cry, going to do something a little different. And it also reminded me of the Shangri-La missions in Far Cry 4, where you would be off in this mystical Shangri-La world on kind of a drug trip, but you would just be fighting with nothing but your bow and arrow and your little tiger that you would command to go take down enemies for you here and there. And I think you're going to probably have a saber-tooth tiger pet, maybe it looks like in Far Cry Primal. So I think it's going to be a lot of that, kind of taking what everybody really thought was a cool idea in those side missions from Far Cry 4 and adapting them into a larger game. So excited about that, excited to see more of it. And it's coming up quick, February 2016. So Ubisoft jumping right out to surprise us with that and letting us know, hey, this game's almost ready. So I'll move on and talk a little bit about non-gaming real quick in We Have Hobbies. So I actually have a lot of things that I've done that don't have to do with gaming at all. In the past week, I finished another Star Wars audiobook. I finished Heir to the Jedi, which is the book that takes place between episode 4 and 5, starring Luke Skywalker. It's one of the few books in the new canon, at least the first one I think out of the 5 I've listened to, that takes place from a first-person perspective. And so we get some of the inner musings from Luke Skywalker. This book started out pretty interesting because we're seeing Luke as a Jedi who is trying to learn how to become a Jedi. He's not really a Jedi Knight yet, right? He had a very minor amount of training on the Millennium Falcon before they got to the Death Star and Obi-Wan was killed. And that's not something I really ever thought a lot about. I mean, I know he doesn't go to Dagobah until Empire Strikes Back. So he doesn't learn from Yoda the ways of the Force and all that. But even as Empire Strikes Back begins, he seems like a little bit of a more seasoned hero, right? He's done the Battle of Yavin and destroyed the Death Star, so we know he's a great pilot, and he's already become a leader in the Rebel Alliance. But it's interesting in this book to see him really grapple with not knowing quite how to become a Jedi, because there's nobody around to tell him what to do. He hasn't heard Obi-Wan's voice since the Death Star. He's not even sure that he really heard Obi-Wan's voice and didn't hallucinate it. So Heir to the Jedi starts out very interesting because he's going to, ancient Jedi areas to try and learn more about how to become a Jedi and things like that. So I found the first half or so of the book to be very enjoyable. I felt like it definitely tapered off towards the latter half, got a little boring, a little too predictable, and just moved kind of slow. And then there wasn't really that Star Wars flavor and action and things into the latter parts of the book. So overall, I felt a little meh on Heir to the Jedi. It's now the fifth of the new canon Star Wars audiobooks that I've listened to, and there's only one left. The sixth one is Aftermath, which is the only one in the new canon novel series so far that actually takes place after Return of the Jedi. So Aftermath will connect that with The Force Awakens. So I've got a little over a month to listen to that final one so that I'm all caught up on the new canon before episode 7 releases in theaters. So I'm interested to see how that one plays out. It'll be nice to finally be in a post-Return of the Jedi world. That was always what I enjoyed about the former Star Wars extended universe that's now just Legends. So looking forward to that. Out of all of the new canon books thus far that I've listened to, only 2 of them do I feel like Star Wars fans are really, really going to enjoy, and those are Dark Disciple, which has a Clone Wars type spin on it, very much like the Clone Wars animated series, and Tarkin, which of course covers the story of Moff Tarkin becoming Grand Moff Tarkin and getting ready to oversee the rest of the construction of the Death Star. Those are the 2 that really shine for me. The rest of them, I think you can safely ignore. They feel a little watered down in comparison to what we used to get in the late 90s and early 2000s out of some of the really great Star Wars novels that were in the extended universe then with the Admiral Thrawn trilogy and things of that nature. I also finished actually reading, not listening to an audiobook, A Feast for Crows, which is the 4th Game of Thrones novel. So I now only have one left, A Dance with Dragons, and I'll be caught up with where George R.R. Martin is in writing those books, because the dude writes extremely slow, but I guess it pays off because they're great books. So I think there are 2 more planned to release that are not out yet. So I've now got one left to read to get caught up to that point, and kind of backlogged watching the show a little bit to catch up. But I think the 4th book, A Feast for Crows, is really good. Obviously, the first 2 Game of Thrones books or Song of Ice and Fire books are still by far the best. They move the quickest. They really pull you in and make you fall in love with the characters the most. The 3rd one, even though the last quarter of that book moves really fast and has a lot of shocking plot twists, the first 3 quarters of that book are really, really slow and introduce a lot of new characters that you don't yet care about. So I think the 3rd book in the Song of Ice and Fire series is definitely the weakest. 4th one luckily got back into the rhythm and maintained a pretty consistent pace throughout, and really started to bring the story together, bring some of those new characters into the fold as some of the older characters are brought less and less emphasis on them for various reasons. So recommend A Feast for Crows, but obviously you're going to need to go read the first 3,000 pages of A Song of Ice and Fire before you get into that. I also finished up my Star Trek The Next Generation run on Netflix, which Star Trek The Next Generation, love that show. Such a classic show, so good. The character development, the acting, you just really come to feel like those actors are your friends. And that was back when seasons of shows had, 20 plus episodes. So 170 plus episodes over 7 seasons. It took me a few years, but I finally finished rewatching all of Star Trek The Next Generation. And man, I could almost just start it over and watch it again. It was so good. If you haven't seen that series from start to finish, go do it. It's all on Netflix. Go watch Riker and Picard and Data and Geordi LaForge and Counselor Troy and Beverly Crusher and all these great characters. And it's one of those series where the finale actually pays off. It actually connects back all the way to the first episode, and it does not disappoint. I'm a huge Battlestar Galactica fan. I loved Lost, all those sorts of things, but they all kind of fell flat with the finale. Star Trek The Next Generation really delivers on the finale quite well. One more thing I'll mention, non-gaming related and also on Netflix, is a movie called Stonehurst Asylum, and that stars Kate Beckinsale and Ben Kingsley. Michael Caine is also in that movie, and I'd never heard of this film. I guess it came out in theaters. I don't know when, never heard of it, but I got to recommend Stonehurst Asylum, especially if you're like me and you don't like horror movies. You find them to be kind of lame. But you want something a little on the creepier, darker side to watch around this Halloween season. Stonehurst Asylum's great. It's an adaptation of an Edgar Allan Poe short story, so you know that it's got a good base, a good foundation to have an interesting story right there. The acting's great. The atmosphere is well done. And there is a plot twist that is revealed early on, and you kind of feel like it's a little deflated at first, and you kind of think, oh, well, they gave away the big twist early on in this movie, but then by the end you realize that they did not, and you are just left a little bit speechless at the very end of that film. So if you like that kind of interesting plot twist, psychological thriller type almost film, I can't even say, I really don't go for the thriller type movies all that often. I'm really more of an action adventure or sci-fi type person. But I enjoyed this film. I enjoyed this film a lot. So go check out Stonehurst Asylum. It's also family friendly. It's a little creepy, but it's not like gory scary, and it doesn't have a lot of bad language. So if you want like a good family friendly movie that still has a good dark side to it that the adults are going to fall in love with, Stonehurst Asylum's pretty good for that. One last thing to mention is that we actually started a new video series on the World Map Podcast. Or kind of a companion to the World Map Podcast, and that's called the Map Key. So if you missed the live show earlier this week, we did Map Key number 1, and I reviewed the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Ghostbusters crossover trade paperback that collects all the comic issues from that crossover. And I got to say, go listen to the review. Go watch the review video. It's a short. We're doing Map Keys as short form, quick video hit reviews and discussions about things that we don't have time to fit into the show. So go check out Map Key number 1. It's on YouTube if you search for it. You can also go to our website at worldmapcast.com, and then we have a separate tab for Map Key that links out to the playlist of those videos, and we're going to try to do those a little more regularly. So give us some feedback. Let us know if you like Map Key. Let us know on Twitter. Shoot us an email, worldmapcast@gmail.com, and let us know what you think about Map Key. But go check that out for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ghostbusters crossover review that I did earlier this week. And I think that's going to just about wrap us up for the show this week. So thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for enduring through yet another solo mission. And hopefully we'll be back to full strength next week. But I do want to thank everyone for hanging out. Again, really, really, really want your feedback for the show. Want to, take things out you don't like. Want to add some things if there are things you're thinking that you would wish the show was doing. We can only change it if we know from you. So give us feedback on Twitter at WorldMapcast. We're also on Facebook. You can email us, worldmapcast@gmail.com. And, oh, by the way, we will also be sure to read your listener emails on the air if you email us at worldmapcast@gmail.com. So feel free to send us questions and comments that you want read on the show also. And obviously, we do the show live every week, every Sunday here on the Google Hangout on Air. And then if you prefer not to watch a live video show, you can always download the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and on our website. And that, again, is worldmapcast@gmail.com. And if you're subscribing on one of the podcast services, one of the things that really helps us get the show discovered and helps us determine, what we should be doing with the show and how much you really like the show and want us to keep doing the show is through the iTunes reviews, for example. So if you're hearing this right now and you still haven't given us an iTunes review, it's not difficult. You go into the iTunes app, you search for the World Map Podcast, you tap on it, you click write a review, you give us 5 stars. You can write the review. You can say anything you want. You can talk about cheese or meat. As many of our fans know, this is sometimes called the World Meat Cast because we're always eating meat on the show. If you want us to eat more vegetables, we'll do that too. But seriously, less than a minute probably to go review us on iTunes. So go do that. Go give us a 5-star review. Give us some feedback on iTunes. And that's probably the best way, other than telling a friend and getting one friend to watch the show, that you can help us out. So sincerely appreciate any time that you'll take to do that. And with that, I will stop harping on it. And until next time, I'm popping smoke.